It was evening in Jerusalem during the sacred time of Passover. The city was full, alive with travelers and worshippers. In a quiet upper room, Jesus Christ gathered with his 12 disciples for what would be their final meal together. There was a deep, unspoken tension in the air. Jesus knew what was coming. The others did not. Before the meal even began, he did something unexpected, something that shocked them all. He rose from the table, took a towel, poured water into a basin, and began to wash the feet of his disciples. This was the work of a servant, not a teacher. When he came to Peter, Peter resisted, saying, "Lord, you shall never wash my feet." But Jesus answered gently, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Humbled, Peter allowed it. One by one, Jesus washed their feet, an act of deep humility and love. After returning to his place at the table, he spoke, "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Then, as they ate, Jesus took bread into his hands. He gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them. "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." After that, he took the cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." The disciples listened. But they did not fully understand. They could not yet see the suffering that was about to unfold. Then Jesus spoke words that disturbed the entire room. "One of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, confused and afraid. "Surely not I?" each of them asked. But the betrayer was already among them, Judas Iscariot. Jesus quietly indicated him, and soon after Judas rose and slipped out into the night, and the night grew darker. After the meal, Jesus led his disciples out of the city. They crossed the Kidron Valley and entered a quiet place filled with olive trees, the Garden of Gethsemane. The air was cool. The night was still, but inside Jesus there was a storm. He told his disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." Taking Peter, James, and John a little further, he began to be deeply troubled and sorrowful. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said. "Stay here and keep watch with me." Then he went a short distance away and fell to the ground. There in the darkness he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." The cup he spoke of was the suffering he was about to endure, the pain, the rejection, the burden of sin. His anguish was so intense that his sweat fell like drops of blood. He returned to his disciples and found them asleep. "Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. Again he went back to pray. Again he surrendered himself to the will of God. And again when he returned, they were sleeping. The loneliness of that moment was deep, but Jesus stood firm. Suddenly the quiet garden was filled with movement, torches, voices, and the sound of approaching footsteps. Judas Iscariot had returned. He was not alone. With him came soldiers and officials sent by the religious leaders. Judas had already arranged a signal. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." He walked straight up to Jesus. "Rabbi," he said softly, and he kissed him. Jesus looked at him with calm sorrow and said, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" The soldiers stepped forward and seized Jesus. One of the disciples tried to fight back, drawing a sword and striking a servant, but Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword away," he said. "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" And just like that, he allowed himself to be taken. The disciples, filled with fear, ran away into the night. Jesus was first taken to the high priest, where religious leaders had already decided his fate. They searched for witnesses to accuse him, but their testimonies did not agree. Finally, the high priest demanded, "Tell us if you are the Son of God." Jesus answered, "You have said so." At this, they declared him guilty of blasphemy. They mocked him, blindfolded him, struck him, and spat on him. But because they did not have authority to execute him, they brought him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. Pilate questioned Jesus. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom is not of this world." Pilate found no fault in him, yet outside the crowd grew louder, demanding death. Pilate offered to release a prisoner, as was the custom. He gave them a choice between Jesus and a known criminal, but the crowd chose the criminal. "Crucify him," they shouted. Though he knew Jesus was innocent, Pilate feared the crowd, so he gave the order. Roman soldiers took Jesus and began to mock him cruelly. They dressed him in a purple robe and placed a crown of thorns on his head. The sharp thorns pressed into his skin, causing blood to flow. They knelt before him in mock worship. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they said, laughing. They struck him again and again. After the beating, they forced him to carry his own cross. Weak and wounded, he struggled along the road toward Golgotha. At one point, he could not carry it any longer. A man from the crowd was forced to carry it for him. Still, Jesus walked on. At last, they reached Golgotha, the place of execution. There, they laid Jesus on the wooden cross. They drove nails through his hands and feet. Then they lifted the cross and dropped it into place. Jesus hung there in agony. Two criminals were crucified beside him, one on his right, one on his left. People passing by mocked him. "Save yourself," they said. "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." But Jesus did not come down. Instead, he looked at those who were hurting him and said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Even in suffering, he showed mercy. Hours passed. Darkness covered the land. Then Jesus cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was the cry of deep suffering, but also the fulfillment of prophecy. At last he said, "It is finished." And with that he gave up his spirit. At the moment of his death, the earth shook, the sky grew dark, the curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. A Roman soldier standing nearby looked at Jesus and said, "Surely this was the Son of God." The body of Jesus Christ was taken down and placed in a tomb. A heavy stone was rolled in front of it. And silence fell. This is the story of sacrifice, pain, and love, one of the most powerful moments in human history.